Your feeling of helplessness is your best friend, savage.
I would like to make this quick apology. The reason why I got very behind on my videos on Anita Sarkeesian's tropes versus women in video games is because I completely forgot about her existence. Which, considering that she's barely pulling in, maybe 1/3 of the audience that she used to, is pretty much the exact opinion of the internet. Face it, the only people that are watching her are her detractors. Everybody else has just moved on from her. So anyway, enough stalling, let's move on with this shit. I haven't got a fucking clue what she's saying with that one clip from Ninja Gaiden. Was it Ninja Gaiden? I can't remember.
Everything is sexist. Everything's offensive to people like me. Let's go through the checklist. It's all misogyny. Everything is sexist when you break the dead.
2014 Electronic Entertainment Expo, the game studio Ubisoft debuted a trailer showcasing the cooperative mode in their upcoming game Assassin's Creed Unity. One thing viewers quickly noticed about the trailer was that all the assassins in it were male.
Oh no, what a nightmare! How is this important? I mean, there are plenty of games that have both female and males, and plus, having all males isn't a sign of sexism. It just means that the creative designers of that game decided either not to have women, which isn't sexist, or two, maybe they didn't have the resources to make an all-female, or half-male, half-female sort of thing. And plus, where's it written that is that most important thing? I'd rather have one well-developed character than 100 undeveloped characters.
When questioned about why female characters weren't an option in this mode, the game's creative director said that although there were originally plans to allow for female assassins, the development team couldn't add them because it would require double the animations, double the voices, and double the visual assets.
I'll tell the person to fuck off. It's my fucking game, and I'll have an all-female cast. It's gonna have an all-male cast. It's my fucking decision, and whatever I say goes. I'm probably throwing something at them just to knock some sense into them.
Meanwhile, a level designer on the game stated that including female assassins would have meant recreating 8,000 animations on a new skeleton. These comments led to an explosion of controversy and criticism on Twitter, with many people using the sarcastic hashtag #WomenAreTooHardToAnimate.
And Anita Sarkeesian has the gall to say other people are entitled. This entire video should be entitled, "I'm entitled to have perfect gender representation because I have a vagina."
A number of experienced game developers joined the chorus of voices calling out the absurdity of Ubisoft's claims. Animator Jonathan Cooper, who had previously worked on Assassin's Creed 3 for Ubisoft, tweeted, "I would estimate this to be a day or two's work, not a replacement of 8,000 animations."
Honestly, my opinion on that game, it probably wouldn't have needed another 2 or 3 days. It probably needed a good few months to sort out the bugs. Mainly because I haven't even played the game, and even I know how bugged up the ass that game was. But, you know, that's the problem with Ubisoft these days. They seem to be rushing their games out a little bit too much, too quickly, and they come across as way too bugged up the ass.
And Manveer Hare of BioWare summed up what Ubisoft was actually saying. "We don't really care to put the effort in to make a woman assassin."
You know what I'm going to get you next Christmas? A big wooden cross. So every time you feel unappreciated for all your sacrifices, you can climb on up and nail yourself to it.
Ubisoft's disregard for female character options didn't stop with Unity. Also at E3 2014, the director of Far Cry 4 admitted to a similar issue with that game's online co-op mode, saying, "We were inches away from having you be able to select a girl or a guy as your co-op buddy." Again, the excuse for why this option wasn't available was that it would be just too much work.
You do know some video games have this thing called a budget. and they can't go over it or the company won't make money. And if they don't make money on it, they won't be able to produce any more video games, and therefore you won't be able to have something to bitch at. And honestly, how is this that important? I mean, I've never... And considering that near enough just under half of my video games don't even have discernible gender as a character. And honestly, good characters aren't defined by their gender. They're defined by their actions, or their words, or how awesome they are, or quotable lines that they've often said.
And yet, again, what they were really saying was that they just couldn't be bothered to do the work it would have taken to provide that option. Though it's worth pointing out that in the 2 years since this controversy, Ubisoft has made clear efforts to improve the representation of women in the core Assassin's Creed games, with the most recent entry, Assassin's Creed Syndicate, giving the option to play as Evie Frye through much of the campaign.
There was Liberation, which was actually the first Assassin's Creed I played. And
of course, Ubisoft weren't and aren't the only ones with this apathetic attitude towards female inclusion. In fact, not doing the necessary work to include women has long been the norm in the video game industry.
And unlike you, who's put in fuck all work. And no, I will not classify this video web series as work, because all she's done is the exact same thing before her Kickstarter. The only difference being is that there's kind of funky animation and a halfway decent tune at the beginning of the video, which I've nobly edited over, because I'm a cheap lazy bastard who needs to get a cheap thrill from something.
The FIFA soccer series, which had its first entry in 1993, took over 20 years before finally introducing female teams in FIFA 16.
You know what? I don't really play sports games. Honestly, if I wanted to get the sense of playing sports, I'd probably just go out there and play actual football.
I'm in the game. We're in the game.
And it took 10 years for Call of Duty to introduce female soldiers into its competitive multiplayer, with 2013's Call of Duty Ghosts. The long-running Battlefield franchise, on the other hand, has still never allowed for playable female characters in its multiplayer modes.
You know what? This just comes across as hugely entitled, which, considering she's complained about gaming entitlement beforehand, is completely 100% hypocritical of her. Gotta admit, she's so stupid she probably doesn't even know what the word hypocritical means, and probably can't even spell it. Probably knowing Anita Sarkeesian should probably say a dictionary is offensive and reinforces the patriarchy and white supremacist and capitalism, even though capitalism is essentially people buying shit.
There's an important conversation to be had about the ways in which military shooters work to glorify violence, but as long as we're going to have such games, it's...
For me, this one line is probably more revealing than any other statement that she wants. I personally don't give a fuck. I personally believe that an art form should have both extremes. I believe there should be extremely violent video games like Duke Nukem, Doom, the Call of Duty series, God of War, and Mortal Kombat, but I think there should also be the counter point, like the Lego series, Ico, Child of Eden, and a few others that I can't think of off the top of my head. Trying to think of any non-violent video games. The Doodle God games, for instance. Because admittedly, Anita Sarkeesian is a zealot. She doesn't want there to be any art form that she either perceives to be offensive or detrimental to her point of view. She thinks that she might think that if we cut off any video game that she doesn't like, that it will somehow reach a higher plane of existence. I personally think that's fucking stupid, and anybody who thinks that should have a penguin thrown at them for no discernible reason other than they're fucking idiots.
Actually better when they include female combatants in them. Now, you might be asking yourself, doesn't having female enemies in a game perpetuate violence against women?
They're not women, they're digital constructs with the outward appearance of gender.
And that's a good and fair question.
Which you're not going to properly answer because you're a fucking idiot.
When we refer to depictions of violence against women...
Has she got split personality? It should be I. Unless Anita Sarkeesian has split personality, or the Venom symbiote from Spider-Man.
We're generally discussing situations in which women are being attacked or victimized specifically because they are women,
They're not women, they're digital constructs.
reinforcing a perception of women as victims.
Oh, that's rich coming from you. You always want to keep women as the victims so you can stand upon their victimized corpses and shout out, "Look at me, I'm oppressed."
Such scenarios are very different from those in which women are presented as active participants. In the Street Fighter games, for instance, when Chun-Li and Ryu fight each other, this isn't considered violence against women because the two characters are presented as being on more or less equal footing, and because Chun-Li is an active participant who isn't being targeted or attacked specifically because she's a woman.
How the fuck do you know that? That's requiring a lot of context, which you wouldn't know the definition of context because you're a fucking idiot.
Similarly, the waves of male attackers players face in so many games are typically not passive victims. They are active participants in the conflict, and importantly, the violence against them isn't gendered.
I will give this video this much. It's probably the least retarded video Anita Sarkeesian's ever made. It's still pretty fucking stupid, but I will give her this. It's not fucking retarded.
Players fight with them because they're on the opposing side, not specifically because they are men.
Pretty much I fight any game characters. I've fought against evil monsters. I've fought men, women, demons. Heck, I've even fought against the T-virus and won. But anyway, moving on.
Unfortunately, when female combatants do appear in games, they're often presented in sexualized ways, which inevitably lend the player's attacks an air of gendered violence.
Gendered violence. Violence itself is not gendered, and trust me, video games are only as truly violent as you let them be. And plus, you shouldn't be playing video games that you don't like. I mean, I'm sorry, but this is just her complaining about the fact that there are certain video games that she doesn't like. You know, video games that are violent or overly sexual, or games with sexualized violence in them. Like I said previously, I think an art form should have both extremes.
In Saints Row III's so-called Horde mode, for instance, players must defeat waves of sexualized women, sometimes beating them to death with a large purple dildo.
There are two things wrong with that. One, she's referencing a game that is clearly absurd, i.e. the Saints Row series, which last time I checked you were fighting aliens in the Matrix. And three, she's referencing something that is purely 100% optional, and in fact, I played Saints Row III, and I didn't actually touch Horde mode because of one discernible reason. It didn't give me any trophies so I decided to skip that mode. But anyway, moving on.
In 2009's game Wolfenstein, the Elite Guard are a special all-female enemy unit whose absurd uniforms sexualize not only the female characters themselves, but also players' acts of violence against them.
You know, I've never played Wolfenstein, the 2009 Wolfenstein. The only thing I can really remember about it is actually is Yahtzee's review where he does the whole thing in rhyme.
Similarly, in 2012's Hitman Absolution, the Saints are a special unit of female assassins who wear latex fetish gear underneath nuns' habits. It's a ludicrous design choice that is transparently intended to sexualize these enemies.
Here's a good idea. Have a point. It makes it so much more interesting for the listener.
And in Metal Gear Solid 4, the Beauty and Beast unit is an enemy group made up of 5 female soldiers that players fight over the course of the game.
You know what I'm going to get you next Christmas? A big wooden cross. So every time you feel unappreciated for all your sacrifices, you can climb on up and nail yourself to it.
At certain points during these encounters, each boss sheds her armor and appears as a woman in form-fitting attire.
And that's not too bad considering both Vamp and Liquid Ocelot are topless during their boss battles.
If players then avoid the Beauty's deadly embrace for several minutes without killing or neutralizing her, the game transports them to a white room where equipping the camera results in the character making sultry poses.
Here's a good idea. Have a point. It makes it so much more interesting for the listener.
Funny how that doesn't happen with the male bosses in the game.
Anyway, the two male bosses, which you only fight 2, Vamp and Liquid Ocelot, if I recall, Liquid Ocelot will make snide sexual gestures to you, and actually, if you get him into the right situation, will actually try and kiss your ear for some odd reason.
Whenever female combatants are dressed in sexualizing attire, it sets them noticeably apart from other enemy units.
Be one angry daddy.
It's intended to make the player's encounters with them sexually titillating, and that's particularly troubling considering that those encounters often involve fighting and killing those characters.
Here's a good idea. Have a point. It makes it so much more interesting for the listener.
Violence against female characters should never be presented as sexy.
It can be presented however the game designers want to present it. It's their fucking game. They can do with whatever the fuck they want to do with it. You have the 100% option of not to play the fucking game. That's something that you need to get through your thick skull of yours. There will be certain things you will never have a true say in.
The way for games to handle female combatants is not to present them as sexualized treats for the player. Rather, it's to present them simply as combatants who happen to be women fighting alongside their male counterparts on equal footing. For all of its many, many problems.
Fuck you and kiss my hairy ass!
One thing BioShock Infinite did right was to include non-sexualized female officers on Columbia's police force.
Face it, the only time I've ever really noticed female combatants in the BioShock series were the first two. And that's only because the female combatants tend to wear dresses, which is a gender signifier thing. And usually, here's the most of the time that I react to women, to people shooting at me, isn't to notice what gender they are. It's usually to shoot some lead at their general direction until they stop shooting lead in my general direction. If you don't like it, it's my fucking game habit, and I'll play with whatever games I want to play and however I want to play them.
And in Assassin's Creed Syndicate, both the player's gang and the enemy gang have rank-and-file female members who fight alongside the men. Despite the presence of female combatants in games like these, there's still a tendency for game studios to treat female representation as some kind of extravagant goal, rather than simply treating it as standard in the same way they handle male representation. The excuse that I hear most often for the absence of female combatants in games is that players wouldn't believe it. But games, even ones that draw on historical locations or events like the Assassin's Creed series, create their own worlds and set the tone for what we will or won't believe. To participate in the worlds games create, we happily accept time travel, superpowers, ancient alien civilizations, the ability to carry infinite items, the idea that eating a hot dog can instantly heal your wounds, and a million other fictions. It's certainly not too much to ask that these fictional worlds give us believable female combatants, too.
Well, tough fucking shit. It's their video game companies. They can have all female combatants. They can have no female combatants. They can have them wearing skimpy bikinis while wielding a giant dildo. Or they can have them dress up in a three-piece suit. It's the game designer's choice, and if you don't like it, you don't have to pay for that fucking game.
The media we engage with has a powerful impact on our ideas of what's believable and what's not.
Maybe to a point, but you know, a lot of video games tend to be absurd with you driving into oncoming traffic. Heck, I'll put it this way, if I drove how I drive in video games, I wouldn't have a car and I wouldn't have a driving license. In fact, I'd probably be dead. But anyway, moving on.
Games like Assassin's Creed Syndicate demonstrate that when the existence of female combatants is presented as straightforward, normal, and believable, players have no problem believing it. And they shouldn't, since unlike those magical healing hot dogs I mentioned, female combatants actually exist.